Good evening. Tonight you will dive into a daily life of people 1,000 years ago. There were no fast changes, no loud cities, no constant movement, only small villages, quiet fields, and slow, repeating days. You are standing on a narrow dirt path. The ground feels firm, slightly uneven. Small stones press softly under your feet. The air is cool, fresh, and still. There are no machines, no distant noise, only the wind, moving slowly through the trees, and far away, a quiet animal sound. The houses are small, made of wood and earth. Their walls are rough, uneven, textured. If you touched them, you would feel dry mud, hardened over time. Nothing is perfect, but everything is enough. No one is in a hurry. People move slowly, step by step. You can almost hear it. Soft footsteps. On dirt, the same path. Walked every day. Morning begins with light, not alarms, not sudden sounds, just a slow change from dark to soft daylight. The air is still cold. Inside the house, it is quiet, dim, and simple. The floor is hard, packed earth or wood, slightly uneven, cool under your feet. There is a faint smell of smoke. The fire must be lit again, slowly by hand. Nothing happens quickly. Every action takes time. Every movement feels familiar. People wake up, they move. They begin the same day. Again and again. Outside, the village is still. The same houses, the same paths. The same open land, fields stretch quietly. Nothing changes fast. As you move through this place, there is nothing to remember, nothing to follow. You can just notice the sound of footsteps, the cool air, the rough wood, the quiet ground. Simple things repeating softly. Everything moves slowly, without effort, without urgency, and as time passes, each moment feels softer. Each thought becomes quieter, and this slow world remains calm, steady, and simple. So now just stay here, in this quiet village, where nothing rushes, where each day feels the same, and where life moves slowly as we gently continue through the calm and ordinary life of people 1,000 years ago. The light continues to grow, slowly, evenly. It spreads across the sky, without hurry. Soft gray becomes pale gold. The village begins to appear more clearly. Shapes of houses, low roofs, wooden walls. Everything looks the same as yesterday. Nothing has moved, nothing has changed. Inside the house, the warmth from the small fire begins to build. Very slowly, it does not fill the room at once. It stays close to the flame. The rest of the space remains cool. Hands move closer to the fire, feeling a little warmth, then pulling back again. Simple, repeated motions. The body wakes gradually, not all at once. There is no need to rush, no clock to follow, only light and habit. Someone steps across the room. The floor feels hard, slightly uneven. Each step is careful and familiar. The same path inside the house. Walked every morning, a wooden door is opened slowly. It makes a soft sound, a low creak. Nothing sharp, nothing sudden, just a quiet movement. Cool air moves inside, fresh and still. Outside, the ground is lightly damp. The earth holds the coolness of the night. Each step leaves a faint mark. The same ground, used every day, nearby. Another door opens, then another, not at the same time, one after another. The village wakes in pieces, never all at once. A figure walks slowly along the path, head slightly lowered, hands relaxed, no quick movements, no urgency, only the beginning of another familiar day. The sound of footsteps is soft, dull against the dirt, steady, even, repeating the same rhythm, over and over. A small animal moves nearby, quiet, unbothered. It follows its own simple routine, just like everything else. Nothing here feels new. Nothing feels unexpected. Back inside, simple tasks continue. Small tools are picked up, wood is moved. Objects are placed where they always are. There is no change in their position, no reason to move them differently. Everything has its place, and it stays there. Hands move slowly. Without thinking, each action is known, learned long ago, repeated every day. The fire grows a little stronger. Its light becomes steadier. Shadows move less. The room becomes easier to see, but still dim, still quiet outside. The light continues to rise. The sky becomes clearer. Soft colors spread gently. Nothing sharp, nothing bright, just a calm beginning. A few more footsteps pass along the path, each one similar to the last. No difference in pace, no change in direction. The same movements, repeated again and again, farther away. Someone begins a simple task, a quiet sound, steady, rhythmic, not loud enough to disturb anything, just part of the background, blending into the stillness. The village is awake now, but it does not feel busy. It does not feel active. Everything moves slowly, each person following the same routine, without thinking about it, without needing to change it. The air remains cool, even as the light grows. There is no sudden warmth, only a gradual shift, barely noticeable. The ground underfoot stays firm, unchanging. Each step feels the same, as it did yesterday, and the day before. There is comfort in this, in knowing exactly how things feel, how they sound, how they move. Nothing surprises you, nothing demands attention. You can simply observe the slow movement of a simple world, a place where time is not measured, only experienced in small, repeated moments. And as everything continues, quietly, steadily, the morning becomes just another part of the same endless pattern, a pattern that does not break, that does not rush, that simply continues, day after day, in the same calm and gentle way. The morning is already in place, fully settled over the land. The light no longer feels new. It is spread everywhere now, soft, steady, and unchanged for a while. The village is awake, but not active in any sudden way. Everything moves slowly, as if the world itself prefers to take its time. Outside the house, the air is cooler in the shade, warmer where the sunlight touches the ground. This difference is small, but noticeable, and it guides the direction of movement. A person steps outside, carefully, not because there is danger, but because there is no need to rush. The door closes behind them. Wood against wood, a soft sound that disappears quickly into the air. Nothing echoes. Nothing repeats loudly. Only silence remains. The path ahead is narrow, made of dirt, pressed down by countless days of walking. It is not marked. It does not need to be. Everyone already knows where it leads. The ground is uneven in places, slightly harder in others. Small stones sit partly buried in the soil. The feet adjust without thought. Movement becomes automatic. Farther ahead, the fields begin to open, wide, quiet, and still they do not look different from yesterday, and they will not look different tomorrow. This is how they remain. For a long time, tools are already waiting near the edge of the field. Simple objects, made of wood and iron, not polished, not new, just used. Repeatedly, their shape has been formed by time, and by hands that return to them every day. Fingers wrap around the handles. The texture is rough, dry, slightly uneven, but familiar, comfortable in its simplicity. There is no introduction to the work, no clear moment where it begins. It simply continues from what was already expected. The soil responds slowly to pressure. It breaks apart in small sections, then settles again. Forward movement, press, lift, repeat. The pattern is steady, not forced, not hurried, just continuous, like breathing that never changes its rhythm. The body begins to follow the motion without resistance, as if it remembers what to do before the mind does. Time in this place does not feel divided. There are no sharp moments that mark beginning or end, only an extended flow of activity, stretching forward without interruption. The sun continues its gradual rise, not sudden, not bright in a harsh way, just a slow increase of light across the land. Shadows shorten slightly, pause, then shift again as time moves forward. But no one follows them closely. Attention remains on the ground, on the movement of soil, on the repetition of effort. In the distance, other figures are visible across the fields, each one separated by space, but not by pace. They all move in a similar rhythm, slow, steady, continuous. There is no competition in speed, no urgency in direction, only parallel effort. Occasional sounds break the silence. A wooden tool striking the earth, a soft scrape of soil being turned. A brief exhale after effort. Then silence returns again, not empty, but complete, the kind of silence that feels natural here, as if it belongs to the land itself. The soil beneath changes slightly with each movement, not in appearance from far away, but in texture up close, looser in some places, more compact in others, but always the same material, always the same ground. There is no thought of finishing quickly, no idea of completion in the modern sense, only continuation. What is done today is part of what was done yesterday, and part of what will be done tomorrow, not separated, but connected like a long thread that does not break. Hands pause briefly, not because the work is finished, but because the body naturally slows for a moment. A short rest that does not feel like interruption, then movement resumes without decision, without change in rhythm. The field itself appears unchanged from a distance, yet slowly over time it becomes slightly different. Subtle shifts in texture, in shape, in the way the soil lies after being worked. But these changes are not noticed in the moment, only in passing, as part of a much longer process. The sky continues to shift overhead. Clouds move far away, barely visible, and even their movement feels slow, as if everything in this world follows the same quiet pace. The body continues working, not with focus on each action, but with acceptance of the sequence, one motion after another forward, press, lift, again and again, until the distinction between moments begins to soften, and everything becomes part of the same continuous activity. There is no pressure in this repetition, only stability, a sense that nothing unexpected will occur, and nothing needs to, because everything required is already known, and already being done. The field stretches further than sight can easily hold, but within it, every small movement remains part of a larger pattern, slow, consistent, and unchanging in its nature. And as the day continues to unfold, nothing interrupts this rhythm. Nothing breaks it sharply. It simply carries on, quietly, steadily, as it always has. The work in the fields slowly fades into the background of the day, not because it ends suddenly, but because time simply moves forward, without clear separation between one activity and the next. The light in the sky has shifted again, slightly higher, slightly brighter, but still soft, never sharp. The world does not feel divided into moments. It feels continuous, as if everything belongs to the same long and quiet flow. A person begins to walk back along the same path, the same narrow line of dirt, pressed down by many days of use. Each step feels familiar, not because it is remembered clearly, but because it has been repeated so often that it no longer needs attention. The ground changes only slightly underfoot. Small stones, dry soil, occasional uneven patches. Nothing unexpected, nothing requiring thought. Far ahead, the village slowly comes into view again. Small shapes of houses, low roofs, simple structures made of wood and earth. They do not stand out from each other. They blend into a single quiet shape of settlement. There is no center that demands attention, no clear boundary between one space and another, only continuity. As the person enters the village space again, the sound of movement changes. Fields are behind now, and the quiet presence of homes replaces them. A door opens somewhere nearby, slowly, with the familiar soft sound of wood. It does not echo, It simply disappears into the air. Inside the house, the air is cooler than outside in some places, warmer near the fire that has been burning since morning. The fire is smaller now, but still alive, still holding warmth in its center. The room itself is simple, not large, not divided into many spaces, just one area where everything happens. Sleeping, eating, resting all in the same place. The floor is hard, either packed earth or worn wood. It does not change much over time. It simply becomes more familiar with use. A hand reaches toward stored food. Nothing complex, nothing prepared in a modern way. Just basic items kept for the day. Bread, grain, perhaps a simple soup. Each movement is slow, not out of tiredness, but out of habit. Nothing here requires speed. Everything has been done the same way before, and will be done the same way again. Water is collected or already stored nearby, carried in simple containers. The sound of liquid moving inside them is faint, barely noticeable. Food preparation is not a separate event. It is part of the same flow as everything else. Fire, hands, simple tools, all used without hesitation. Everything has a place, and everything returns to that place afterward. There is no need for arrangement beyond what is already known. The body moves through these actions almost automatically, like a sequence that has been learned long ago, and no longer needs to be remembered consciously. Outside, the village remains quiet, not empty, but calm in its activity. Somewhere a soft sound of footsteps passes again. Someone moving between houses, no rush in their movement, no clear destination that feels urgent, just continuation of daily routine. Inside the house, light shifts slightly as the fire flickers. Shadows move gently along the walls, never sharply, always slowly. The air carries a faint smell of smoke mixed with wood and earth, a simple combination that remains constant throughout the day. There is no separation between work and rest in a strict sense, only different forms of the same ongoing life. Sometimes movement, sometimes stillness, but never sudden change. Food is consumed slowly, without distraction, without anything competing for attention. There is only the act itself and the quiet space around it. After eating, there is no immediate shift in activity, no rush to begin something new. Instead, there is a pause, a natural slowing of the body, not forced, but accepted. The hands rest, the body remains still for a moment, and the world outside continues in its own steady rhythm. The village does not become louder or quieter. It simply continues, as it always has. Time in this place is not measured in sharp transitions, but in gradual shifts. Morning into midday, midday into afternoon, without clear edges between them, only a slow change in light and temperature, and the feeling of the air. The ground outside slowly warms as the day progresses, but it never becomes intense, only slightly different from earlier hours. Everything remains within a narrow range of experience, comfortable in its predictability. A person may step outside again briefly, not because something new is required, But because movement itself is part of the rhythm, the same path is taken once more. Familiar ground, familiar air, familiar silence. In the distance, fields remain visible beyond the village edge, not as a separate world, but as a continuation of the same one. There is no boundary that feels absolute, only gradual transition from one space to another. Back inside again, the fire continues its slow presence, smaller now than in the morning, but still steady, still warm enough to remain useful. Nothing in the room changes quickly. Objects stay where they are placed, not because they are fixed permanently, but because there is no reason to move them often. Everything is already known. Everything already has its place. The day continues in this way, not marked by events, but by quiet repetition of small actions, simple movements, and familiar patterns. There is no expectation that anything will interrupt this rhythm, and so nothing does. The world remains consistent, steady and calm, as the light outside begins its slow shift once more, moving gradually toward the later part of the day, without urgency, without interruption, just continuation of the same quiet life. The day begins to change its shape, not suddenly, but in a way that is almost unnoticeable at first. The light becomes softer, less direct, more spread across the land. Shadows begin to stretch slowly, not sharply, but gently, as if the world is being lowered into a quieter version of itself. Inside the village, movement becomes slightly slower than before, not because anything stops, but because energy naturally fades with the light. The same paths are still used, the same doors still open and close, but everything feels less active, more settled. A person walks back along a familiar route. The ground is still warm from the day, but the air above it begins to cool. This contrast is subtle, but noticeable to the body. The skin feels it before the mind does. A shift from warmth to calm air, from activity to stillness. Houses appear darker as the sun lowers. Their shapes become less detailed, more like quiet silhouettes against a fading sky. Wooden walls that were clearly visible before now blend softly into shadow. Doors open less frequently now, and when they do, the sound is softer than earlier in the day, almost hesitant. Inside one of the houses, the fire becomes more important again, not for cooking, but for light and warmth. Its glow is steady, smaller than in the morning, but more noticeable in the dimming room. Shadows gather along the edges of the walls, but never feel sharp or threatening, only present as part of the natural transition of the day. Simple objects in the room become harder to distinguish, not because they move, but because the light around them fades. Everything slowly returns to a simpler visual form, less detail, more calmness outside. The village does not become silent all at once. It fades gradually, step by step, sound by sound. A final few footsteps pass along the dirt path, slow, even, familiar, then fewer, then almost none. The air itself feels heavier in a calm way, as if it is settling down with the land. not pressing, just resting. Inside the house, people begin to sit or lie down, not at the same moment, but one after another, each following their own quiet rhythm of ending the day. There is no formal signal for sleep, no clear instruction, only the natural conclusion of light and energy. Small tasks are finished without urgency. Objects are left where they belong. Nothing is rearranged unnecessarily, because everything will be the same tomorrow. Firelight flickers gently, its movement slow and irregular, casting soft shifting patterns on the walls. But even this movement feels calm, not distracting, just present. The warmth from the fire becomes the center of the room now, drawing attention inward, away from the outside world. The outside is no longer active in the same way. It has transitioned into quietness. Fields are now dark shapes in the distance, no longer visible in detail, only suggested forms beneath the night sky. The sky itself changes gradually, from pale tones to deeper shades, until it becomes fully dark. But even darkness here is not complete absence. It is filled with faint presence, of air, of space, of stillness. Inside the house, breathing slows, movements become minimal, not forced, but natural. The body understands that the day is ending, without needing to be told. There is no need to prepare in complex ways for sleep. No modern separation between activity and rest routines. Only the simple transition from wakefulness to quiet rest. Someone adjusts their position slightly on a simple sleeping place, made of basic materials, soft enough for rest, but not designed for comfort in a modern sense. It is enough, and that is all it needs to be. The fire continues to burn quietly, smaller now, but still present, a steady point of light in the darkness. Its sound is faint, occasional small movements of wood and flame, barely audible outside. There is almost no movement left in the village, only occasional natural sounds, wind moving lightly through trees, or distant animal life continuing its own quiet rhythm. But even these sounds feel distant, as if separated from the human world for the night. Inside, the room becomes stiller with each passing moment. Thoughts slow down, not intentionally, but naturally, as if the mind itself follows the same pattern as the land outside. Gradual calm, uninterrupted. The firelight grows softer, less bright, and more diffuse, until it feels like part of the darkness rather than separate from it. Time is no longer something that is measured here. There are no markers of it now, only the slow fading of awareness. Breathing becomes steady, almost indistinguishable from silence. The body rests, without resistance, without expectation. Everything that was done during the day now feels distant, not important in this moment. Only the present stillness remains. And as the night settles fully over the village, there is nothing left to follow, nothing left to do, only the continuation of quiet rest. Soft, steady, uninterrupted, like the land itself has entered sleep and remains there, without urgency, without change, just calm and stillness. The night continues without interruption. There is no clear boundary where it begins or deepens. It simply remains as a complete state of the world. The village is no longer active in any visible way, not because something has ended, but because everything has naturally slowed down to its lowest rhythm. Inside the houses, firelight is now very small, almost minimal, just enough to exist, not enough to dominate anything around it. Its glow moves gently across nearby surfaces, soft, irregular, like a slow breathing pattern made of light. The room itself is quiet in a way that feels full, not empty, but complete. Every object is still, every surface unchanged. The only movement is the fire, and even that feels distant now. Outside, the land is fully dark. Not absolute darkness, but a layered one where shapes exist without detail. Fields, paths, houses, all reduced to simple outlines within the night. There is no urgency anywhere, no direction of movement, only presence. The air feels cooler now, settled, stable, as if it has also slowed down with everything else. Occasional sounds appear, not frequent, not continuous. A soft shift of wind through dry grass, a distant movement of something small in the earth. Then silence again. Not broken silence, but continuous silence that allows brief sounds to exist within it. Inside one of the houses, a person adjusts slightly in their resting position, not waking, just a small, unconscious correction of comfort, the kind of movement that happens without awareness, then stillness returns immediately. Breathing continues at a steady rhythm, slow, even, almost blending into the quiet of the room. The fire crackles once, a soft sound, then returns to its low state. No change in brightness, only continuation of its minimal presence. The walls of the house are now mostly shadow, with only faint traces of firelight touching them. Edges are no longer clear. Everything becomes softer in perception, less defined, more uniform outside. The village remains unchanged in its stillness. No doors open, no footsteps appear, no visible movement breaks the surface of the night, but the place does not feel abandoned. It feels paused, as if waiting without expectation. Time here does not move in visible steps anymore. It flows without markers, without reference points, a continuous state that cannot be divided into smaller parts. The sky above is dark and wide, without urgency. Stars are present in some areas, faint, distant, not demanding attention, only existing quietly in the background of the night. There is no need to look at them, but they are there nonetheless, like everything else in this world, simply continuing inside the house. The fire becomes even smaller over time, not going out yet, but reducing its presence to almost nothing more than a soft point of warmth. Its movement slows further, until it feels almost still. The room is now dominated by darkness rather than light, but this darkness is not heavy. It is neutral, calm, familiar. The body lying within it is no longer engaged with the world outside. There is no sense of direction, no need for awareness beyond the immediate stillness. Breathing continues, steady, uninterrupted. each inhale and exhale blending into the same rhythm. No distinction between effort and rest. Everything becomes part of a single continuous state. The outside world no longer feels separate. It feels distant enough to not exist in the foreground of awareness, yet still present as a quiet background layer, like a memory that does not require recall, just existence. The fire gives one last, slightly stronger flicker, then returns to its smallest state again. No change follows, only continuation of quiet burning. The wooden structure of the house remains still. No creaks, no shifts, only the subtle settling of material over time, as if the building itself is resting, not holding tension, just existing in place. The night continues to deepen in perception, not because it becomes darker in a dramatic way, but because awareness itself becomes softer, less focused, more diffuse. Sounds become rarer, and those that remain feel far away, unimportant, not disturbing anything, just passing through silence without altering it. Inside, thoughts slow further, not actively, but naturally, like sediment settling in still water. No sharp edges remain in perception, only smooth continuity. The distinction between inside and outside begins to fade, not physically, but perceptually, as if everything belongs to the same quiet space now. There is no separation that matters in this moment, only continuity of stillness. The fire is now barely visible, just a faint suggestion of warmth, enough to exist, but not enough to draw attention. And even that slowly diminishes in perception. The body remains still, completely at rest, no need to adjust further, no need to respond to anything, because nothing is requesting response. The world has fully transitioned into its resting state, and remains there without interruption. Time no longer feels structured. It is not moving forward or backward. It is simply present, as a continuous background state of existence. The village, the fields, the houses, all remain in their quiet form, unchanged, unmoving, not because they are frozen, but because nothing is required of them now. The night continues like this, without emphasis, without change in direction, just steady presence. Soft, deep, and unbroken, the fire fades even further into near invisibility, becoming almost indistinguishable from the darkness around it, and yet it still exists, barely, just enough to remain part of the world. Breathing remains steady, and slower now, as if the body itself is aligning with the stillness outside, not resisting it, but matching it. The final layer of awareness becomes quiet, not disappearing suddenly, but dissolving gradually into the same calm field that surrounds everything else. And as the night continues without end, there is nothing left to follow, nothing left to distinguish, only the continuous state of rest, deep, uninterrupted, and complete. The night is no longer at its deepest point, but it has not yet changed into morning. It exists in a narrow space between the two states, a space without definition. The village remains still, not in a frozen way, but in a continuous absence of activity. Everything continues resting as before, Inside the houses, the fire is now extremely small, almost invisible unless looked at closely. Just a faint presence of warmth. Not light anymore, only heat remaining in a minimal form. The room is completely quiet, not empty, but fully settled into stillness. The walls hold no movement. No sound emerges from the structure of the house. Only the slow rhythm of breathing remains present. Steady, soft, unchanging outside. The land is dark, but the darkness is no longer absolute. There is a subtle shift beginning in the sky, not visible at first, only perceptible as a change in depth, as if the night is becoming thinner, not ending yet, but loosening its hold on the world. Fields are still shapes without detail. Paths still exist as faint lines across the ground. Houses remain silhouettes within the wider space of darkness. Everything is the same as before, but something in perception begins to shift, very slowly, a quiet transition that cannot be pointed at directly. Inside the house, a small movement happens, not waking, not conscious action, just a slight adjustment of the body. Then stillness returns immediately. This kind of movement is not new. It belongs to the natural rhythm of long rest. Outside, the air feels slightly different now. Still cool, but less heavy than before, as if something in it has begun to loosen. Wind moves once softly, through grass and trees, then disappears again. Silence returns without interruption. The fire inside gives a faint flicker, barely noticeable, as if reacting to a change that is not fully present yet. Then it stabilizes again, remaining in its smallest form. The sky above continues its slow transformation, not brightening yet, but shifting away from deepest darkness towards something more open, less dense. Time here does not feel like progression. It feels like unfolding, a gradual revealing of something that was already there, just hidden behind stillness. Inside the village, no doors open yet, no footsteps appear yet, but the possibility of movement begins to return, not as action, but as readiness within the environment itself. The ground remains unchanged, cool, firm, familiar, but it no longer feels completely closed off from activity. There is a subtle sense of return forming in the space, not visible, not measurable, just present in the atmosphere. Inside the house, breathing remains slow, but slightly less heavy than before. The body is still in rest, but not in deepest rest anymore. A transition is forming naturally, without instruction, without awareness of change. The fire continues its minimal presence, not growing yet, but no longer fading either. It holds steady at its lowest point, like a pause between states outside. The sky continues its gradual shift. A faint suggestion of lighter tone begins to appear far above the horizon. Not yet color, only reduction of darkness in a specific direction, barely noticeable unless observed over time. The village remains silent, but silence now feels different than before, less complete, more open, as if space itself is preparing to allow sound again. Inside the house, another small movement occurs, this time slightly more defined, still not waking, but closer to awareness. Then stillness resumes again. The rhythm of sleep is not broken, only soft at its edges. The fire gives a very faint shift in glow, a momentary change, then returns to its steady, minimal state. Nothing becomes brighter yet, but nothing remains fully static either. The transition is underway, quiet, gradual, inevitable outside. The sky continues its slow return toward light, still far from sunrise, but no longer in deepest night. This middle state has no sharp identity. It is neither night nor morning fully. It is only passage, a long, continuous movement between two conditions. Fields begin to separate slightly from darkness, not fully visible, but less absorbed into it than before. Shapes gain the slightest definition again. Paths become faintly traceable once more. The village remains still, but the stillness now feels lighter, less dense, more transitional. Inside the house, breathing continues steadily, but with a subtle shift in rhythm. Not waking, just approaching surface awareness in cycles, then returning to rest, like waves that do not fully break. The fire remains constant at its smallest level. No growth yet, only endurance through the transition period. Outside, the sky continues to open slowly. A faint gradient begins to form near the horizon, barely perceptible at first, then gradually more present. Not color yet, only reduction of darkness intensity. The land responds without movement. There is no reaction, only alignment with the shift above it. Inside the village, silence continues, but it no longer feels absolute. It feels like silence that is waiting to become something else. Not broken, but preparing to change form. Inside the house, the body remains at rest, but awareness begins to return in fragments. Not full consciousness, just soft edges of perception reappearing. Sound is still absent, movement still minimal, but the boundary between sleep and waking becomes thinner. The fire flickers once more, slightly brighter than before. Not enough to change the room, but enough to signal continuation of life within it. Outside, the sky continues its slow transition, still far from full morning, but clearly no longer deepest night. The village remains quiet, yet something in its atmosphere has shifted permanently toward return. Not sudden, not complete, just ongoing movement toward the next phase of the day. Inside the house, breathing remains steady, and the final moments of deep rest begin to loosen gently, not ending abruptly, but dissolving into the early structure of waking life. The fire holds its faint presence, and the world waits in silence for the first clear return of light, and movement, and another cycle of the same familiar day. The sky is no longer in its deepest pre-dawn state. It has begun to open more clearly now, not suddenly, but in a slow and continuous unfolding. The darkness is still present, but it is no longer absolute. It is thinning across the horizon, like something slowly being pulled away, revealing what was always underneath. Inside the houses, the fire is still alive, but now it is no longer only a faint presence. It has regained a small stability, a slightly stronger glow than before, enough to gently shape the room again. Walls become faintly visible. Objects regain soft outlines, but everything remains quiet, still in the final layer of rest. Breathing continues inside the space, steady, calm, not yet fully awake, but no longer in deep sleep either. Outside, the air begins to change first. Before anything else, it feels lighter, less dense, as if the world itself is loosening from night. A very faint wind moves through the village. Not strong, just enough to signal movement returning to the environment. Grass shifts slightly. Trees respond with minimal motion. Then stillness returns again. But it is a different kind of stillness now. Not frozen, but expectant. Inside the village, the shapes of houses become more visible. Not fully clear yet, but no longer only silhouettes. Edges begin to return. Lines become slightly more defined. The world is slowly regaining structure. Inside one house, a small shift happens in the body resting there. A change in position, slightly more conscious than before, but still within the transition of waking. No full movement yet, only the beginning of awareness returning. The fire flickers gently in response to air moving through the room, not growing rapidly, but becoming more stable, more present. The room is no longer dominated by darkness alone. Soft gradients of light begin to form near the smallest openings in the structure. Outside, the horizon continues to lighten. A faint separation between earth and sky becomes clearer, still subtle, but steadily growing. Fields that were once completely absorbed into darkness now show faint texture again. The land is returning slowly into visibility, step by step. The village remains quiet in sound, but not in state. It is in transition now, from rest to movement, from silence to activity. Inside another house, a second small movement occurs, this one slightly more deliberate. Still not full waking, but closer, a natural response to the change in environment. The body does not yet fully engage with the day, but it begins to leave the deepest layer of rest behind. Firelight grows slightly brighter again, not dramatically, just enough to extend its reach in the room. Shadows become softer, less heavy, more transparent outside. The sky continues to shift, not into full daylight yet, but into a state that clearly signals the end of night. The village begins to feel more defined as a whole space. Paths are visible again. House shapes are clearer. The landscape is no longer abstract. It is returning to detail. Inside the village, the first signs of active movement begin. A door opens somewhere in the distance. Slowly, carefully. The sound is soft but distinct enough to mark change. Then another sound follows after a short pause. Not synchronized, just natural sequence of individual waking. Still no rush, still no urgency, only gradual return of life into the space. Inside the house, breathing becomes slightly deeper. Not faster, just more connected to awareness. The transition from sleep continues smoothly, without interruption. The fire now clearly illuminates parts of the room again, not fully bright, but enough to restore shape and presence to objects. The wooden structure of the house becomes more readable. Edges of furniture appear again in soft light. Outside, the sky now shows a clear gradient. From darker upper tones to lighter horizon line, this is no longer night in function. Even if it still resembles it in some parts, it is the beginning of morning. The village responds to this shift slowly, not as a collective action, but as many small individual returns to wakefulness, one by one, not all at once, always staggered, always gentle. Inside one house, a person finally begins to sit up more fully, not abruptly, but as a continuation of previous small movements. This is the first clear step out of sleep. Not dramatic, just natural completion of rest cycle. The fire continues to burn steadily now, no longer minimal, but stable enough to support morning light outside. The world is now clearly in transition toward day. The land is visible again. Fields, paths, structures, all returning into form, still soft in detail, but fully present now. The village is no longer in night state, but in early morning state, a space between rest and full activity. Inside the houses, more movement begins gradually, small sounds of adjustment, simple actions that signal waking life returning. Not chaos, not urgency, just continuation of routine existence. The firelight and natural light now exist together in the room, neither dominating fully yet, creating a balanced space between night and day. Outside, the horizon brightens further, not sudden sunrise yet, but steady expansion of light across the land. The sky continues its slow transformation, as if the entire world is taking one long, quiet breath and releasing the night. Inside the village, the cycle is almost complete. Sleep has ended, and waking has begun again, not as a break from what came before, but as continuation of the same pattern, the same rhythm, the same life unfolding once more. And as the light continues to grow, everything returns slowly to movement, to awareness, to another ordinary day. The morning is now fully present across the land, not as something sudden, but as something that has slowly taken its place, layer by layer, until the night is no longer felt in any part of the village. Light spreads evenly now, soft but steady, covering fields, paths, and houses with the same calm visibility. There is no sharp transition anymore, only full continuation of the new state of the day. Inside the houses, firelight is no longer the main source of presence in the room. It still exists, but now it is secondary, a quiet companion to the natural light entering from outside. The room feels more open again. Objects regain full shape. Edges are clear, surfaces visible without effort. The space returns to its simple daytime structure, not different from before, only fully revealed again. Inside one house, a person is now fully awake, not rushing, not active in any extreme way, just present in the morning state of the body. Movement begins slowly, hands adjusting simple objects, a slight shift of posture, a pause before standing fully. Everything is unhurried, as if speed has no relevance here at all. Outside, the village is awake again, not all at once, but in a distributed rhythm. One house after another, one door after another. Small movements spreading across the space like a quiet pattern. No noise dominates. No single action defines the moment. Only many small returns to daily life. The ground outside is now clearly visible. Dirt paths, worn edges, familiar routes between homes. Everything appears the same as yesterday, and the same as it will appear tomorrow. This stability is not noticed actively. It is simply part of the environment, a constant condition of existence here, inside another house. A container is picked up, simple materials, used daily, nothing new about it, nothing unusual, just part of the repeated structure of life. Water is moved from one place to another, slowly, carefully, without waste, without urgency. Fire is now minimal again, not central anymore, only maintained lightly, as something that continues in the background of the day. Outside, light continues to strengthen slightly, but no longer changes dramatically. It has reached its stable morning state. Fields are now fully visible. Grass texture is clear again. Paths show their worn patterns. The village is fully re-established in daylight. Movement increases gradually, not rapidly, but in a natural expansion of activity. People move between houses, between fields, between simple tasks that define the day ahead. There is no central event guiding this movement, only continuation of familiar routine. Inside the village, sound is present now, but not overwhelming. Footsteps, soft speech fragments, wood moving against wood, the small sounds of daily existence returning fully. Yet none of them dominate the environment. They exist together, balanced within the space. The air is now warmer than before, but still mild, not intense, just comfortable enough to support activity. The sky is fully open above now, no remaining trace of night and brightness, only the soft structure of daytime atmosphere. Clouds, if present, move slowly across the sky, without urgency, without dramatic formation. Everything remains aligned with the same slow rhythm that defines this place. Inside one of the houses, food preparation resumes again. Simple actions, repeated from previous days. Nothing new is introduced, nothing changed in method. The repetition itself is the structure of life here. Hands move without hesitation, not because everything is automatic, but because everything is known, and knowledge replaces the need for decision in each moment. Outside, more people are now visible moving through paths, each one following their own direction, but all within the same general rhythm of the village. There is no urgency in spacing, no conflict in movement. Paths are shared without disruption. Everything flows alongside everything else. Inside the fields nearby, work may begin again later. But for now, movement is still settling into the full shape of the day. The land itself feels stable again, no longer in transition, fully in daytime state. The cycle has moved forward completely. Night is no longer present anywhere in perception. It exists only as memory of what has already passed, not actively held, just part of continuity. Inside the village, life continues in its normal structure, Not faster than before, not slower than before, just consistent, the same rhythm that has always existed here, uninterrupted by any sudden change. Firelight is now only a small background element in some houses, not central anymore, but still present where needed. Natural light defines everything now, as it always does during this part of the day. Movement continues across the village, small tasks being completed, simple exchanges happening between people, quiet coordination of shared space, without formal structure, but still organized through habit and repetition. There is no sense of beginning or end to these actions, only continuation of daily life as it always unfolds. Outside the village, fields extend quietly into the distance, unchanged in structure, familiar in appearance, always ready for the same cycle of work that returns each day. The sky remains steady above everything, not emphasizing any moment, just existing as continuous presence over the land. Inside one house, a final small adjustment is made, a simple movement that completes transition from rest to full wakefulness. Nothing dramatic, just final alignment of body with the day, and then stillness again. Not sleep, but calm readiness for continuation of life. And as the morning fully stabilizes across the village, there is no final moment that stands out, no conclusion that feels separate from what came before, only the continuation of the same pattern that has already been unfolding. Night gives dawn, gives morning, gives day, and now the day simply continues forward, without interruption, without change in structure, only the quiet persistence of life itself.
The day continues, but nothing about it moves forward in any meaningful way anymore. It does not feel like a sequence now, only a present state that extends without edges. The village exists in full daylight, steady, unchanged, not as something happening, but as something simply being observed. Closer now, slower, smaller in detail. The focus is no longer on actions, but on the surface of those actions, the texture of existence itself. Inside one of the houses, a hand moves slowly toward a simple object, a bowl, wood or clay, worn by repeated use. The surface is not smooth. It carries small irregularities, tiny lines formed over time, not important individually, but noticeable when observed closely. The hand touches it, not quickly, not decisively, just contact, light pressure against surface. Fingers adjust slightly, feeling weight, temperature, texture. Everything is quiet enough that even this small contact feels expanded. Water is present nearby, not moving dramatically, just still liquid inside a container. Its surface reflects a soft version of light from the room. Not bright, not sharp, just a muted reflection that shifts slightly with movement in the air. A slow motion of filling begins. Water poured gently. Sound is minimal. Not a flow, but a controlled transfer. Each drop or small stream changes the sound of the space slightly, but never breaks it. The sound exists inside silence, not against it. Wooden surfaces absorb light differently depending on angle. Some parts appear darker, some slightly lighter, not because they change, but because perception shifts with position. A slow tilt of the head changes everything, but nothing itself changes. Outside, air moves faintly through the village, a soft wind passing through dry grass, not strong enough to move anything significantly, only enough to suggest presence. This movement is not direction. It is texture, like invisible fabric passing through space. Inside the house, a cloth is lifted. Simple material, worn, soft at the edges from repeated use. It moves slowly through the air, folding slightly under its own weight. The motion is not dramatic, but continuous. And continuity is what defines it. Light touches the fabric differently as it moves, creating shifting tones across its surface, not changing the object, only revealing different sides of it. Everything is closer now, as if attention itself has moved inward, toward smaller and smaller details. A finger traces a surface, not intentionally for exploration, but as part of simple interaction. The texture is uneven, slightly rough in some places, softer in others. This difference is not important, but it is present, and presence is enough. The room temperature remains stable, neither warm nor cold in a noticeable way, just existing as background condition, not interfering with anything. Breathing is present in the space, not as focus, but as rhythm that does not require awareness anymore. Inhale, exhale, slow enough to disappear into silence between sounds. Outside, a faint shadow moves across the ground. Not something passing quickly, but slow alignment of light and object in distance. It is not meaningful movement, only interaction between light and surface. Dust particles are visible briefly in a shaft of light entering the room. Not many, just enough to be noticed when focus is close enough. They drift slowly, not falling, not rising, just suspended in the space of air. Their motion is almost imperceptible unless observed carefully. Inside the house, another object is placed down. Soft contact with surface. No impact, only gentle completion of motion. The sound is absorbed immediately into the environment, not echoing, not repeating, just existing for a moment. Then gone. Light across the wall shifts slightly, not because time has passed in any dramatic sense, but because the angle of perception changes. A subtle repositioning of awareness reveals new patterns. Grain in wood becomes visible. Small variations in material structure appear and disappear, depending on focus. Everything is extremely close now, not physically, but perceptually, as if the world has been brought inward, reduced to details that usually go unnoticed. Outside, the village remains steady. No new movement defines it, only continuation of small existing patterns. A door far away shifts slightly in wind, not opening, not closing, just pressure against surface changing momentarily. Then stillness again. Inside the house, fabric is folded slowly, not in a strict shape, but in natural layering, one part over another. Soft alignment of material against itself. No urgency in structure, only gradual arrangement. The sound of movement is minimal, almost entirely absorbed into silence. The world feels closer now, not in distance, but in attention. The village is still there, but it is no longer seen from within it. The perspective has shifted. Not suddenly, but as if attention has quietly moved upward, away from individual actions, away from close details, and into a wider, detached observation. From above, the village becomes a structure rather than a lived space. Houses are no longer places. They are shapes, arranged across the land in simple, functional patterns. Paths between them are no longer personal routes. They are lines, worn into the ground through repetition. Fields stretch outward in irregular rectangles and soft boundaries, not defined by importance, but by use over time. There is no focus on people now. If movement exists, it is only suggested, small and secondary, barely distinguishable from the environment itself. What becomes visible instead is structure and repetition and stillness between movements. Smoke rises from a few points in the village. Slow vertical lines breaking the horizontal calm of the landscape. They do not rush upward. They drift, softly dispersing as they rise into the air, then disappearing into the wider sky. From this distance, they are the clearest sign of life, not sound, not motion, but slow transformation of matter into atmosphere. The roofs of the houses hold steady. Their surfaces reflect light unevenly, some slightly brighter, some duller, depending on angle and material. There is no central point of attention in the village anymore. Everything is distributed evenly. No object dominates the frame. The fields surrounding it are quiet, not empty, but inactive in visible terms. Grass moves only slightly when wind passes through, barely enough to register as motion at this distance. The roads between spaces appear like faint threads, connecting points that are no longer seen as destinations, just parts of a larger system. The sky above is wide and unchanged in structure. Light is stable now, not shifting dramatically, only slowly adjusting across the entire surface of the land. From this perspective, time feels less like progression and more like distribution. Everything exists at once, spread across space, rather than moving through sequence. There is no sense of beginning or end in what is observed, only continuity of forms. Smoke, roofs, fields, paths, each holding its position without urgency. Occasional movement appears at ground level, but it is minimal at this distance, too small to separate into individuals. It becomes part of the general texture of the village instead, like subtle shifts within a larger pattern. Nothing interrupts the overall stillness. Even movement does not break it. It is absorbed into the structure of observation itself. The wind moves across the landscape in soft waves, passing through fields and over rooftops, not changing anything permanently, only briefly altering surface texture. Grass bends slightly, then returns. Smoke tilts for a moment, then stabilizes again. Everything returns to equilibrium quickly. This balance is constant, not maintained actively, but naturally existing in the environment. From above, the village feels less like a place of activity, and more like a pattern that repeats itself over time, built from small actions that are no longer individually visible, but collectively form a stable structure. There is no emotional framing in this view, no sense of importance or urgency, only observation of arrangement and repetition and quiet persistence. The edges of the village fade gradually into surrounding land. There is no sharp boundary between settlement and nature, only gradual transition of density and structure, as fields give way to open terrain and paths dissolve into wider ground. The entire scene exists as one continuous surface, organized but not divided, structured but not segmented. Smoke continues to rise in slow intervals, marking invisible points of warmth below, then dispersing into the air above without trace. The village remains unchanged in form, yet always slightly different in detail depending on moment of observation. But those differences are too small to define anything new. They remain within the same overall pattern, stable, repeating, continuous. From this perspective, silence is not absence of sound, but absence of focus on sound. Everything exists, but nothing is isolated enough to stand out. The observer does not move closer or farther, only remains at distance, holding the entire structure in view without interaction. There is no narrative progression here, only spatial awareness and slow environmental motion. The village continues beneath this gaze, not changed by being seen, not influenced by observation, simply existing as it already was, and as it continues to exist in this steady form, the sense of time becomes less defined, and more like a constant layer over everything at once. Time does not move forward here anymore, not in any clear direction, not as a sequence of moments connected to each other. It becomes something else entirely, not broken, but unstructured. The village is still present, but when it is present no longer matters. There is no morning, no midday, no evening forming ahead, only a continuous state that does not divide itself into parts, now, and stillness, and continuation. These are not separate ideas anymore. They are the same condition, seen from different levels of attention. Movement still exists in the village, but it no longer belongs to a timeline. A person walks along a path, but there is no sense that this is after something or before something else. The movement simply is. Then it is no longer relevant that it continues. Another person performs a simple task near a wall, hands moving, stopping, resuming, but not as steps in a process, only as presence changing shape without direction. Light shifts across surfaces, but not as progression of the day, not as passage from one stage to another. It simply changes, without explanation, without reference to time behind it. There is no reason for brightness to increase or decrease. It just does. And that is all it is. The same actions repeat across the village. But repetition is no longer repetition, because there is no original moment to compare it to. Nothing comes again. It only continues, without memory of a first time, without expectation of a next one. The concept of sequence dissolves slowly, not through change, but through loss of structure that defines change. Everything remains visible, but nothing is ordered. Nothing is placed before or after anything else. A movement of water, a step on a path, a shift of air through open space. All of it exists at once, not layered in time, but spread across a single continuous field of presence. Even stillness is not fixed. It is simply another form of continuation, not absence of motion, but motion that does not register as change anymore. The village does not progress, because progression requires direction, and direction no longer exists here. There is only continuation, a soft persistence of being, without edges, without segmentation, without transitions that can be identified. Light moves across surfaces, but not because time is passing. It simply is in another position now, and that position is not later than before. It is just different, without comparison. People move through space, but they are not part of a story unfolding. They are part of the same continuous field as everything else, like wind, like dust in air, like sound that does not belong to a source anymore. There is no moment being reached, no next state forming ahead, only presence that does not divide itself into intervals. Now is not a point. It is not a boundary. It is not even a moment. It is the entire field in which everything exists without separation. Stillness is not the absence of change. It is the absence of need for change to be defined. Continuation is not movement forward. It is existence without interruption. And in this condition, nothing needs to resolve. Nothing needs to conclude. Because nothing is unfolding in the first place. It is only appearing, and remaining, and continuing. The village begins to feel distant again. Not because it is disappearing, but because attention is moving away from detail, away from structure, away from the layered presence that filled everything before. What remains is simpler now, less defined, as if the world is being observed from the edge of sleep itself. The sharpness of forms softens, not abruptly, but gradually dissolving into quiet familiarity. Night returns, not as a specific moment in time, but as a condition that has always been present underneath everything else. It does not arrive. It reveals itself again, the way it was always there, just not noticed. The soundscape thins out, not into silence, but into something softer than silence, a background stillness that does not require awareness to exist. A slow fire becomes visible again, not large, not dominant, just enough to mark presence in the dark. Its light does not push away darkness. It exists inside it, small, steady, unhurried. Shadows do not move quickly anymore. They settle, as if they were never in motion to begin with, only changing position through long, unobserved intervals. The sense of distance returns, but without separation. Everything feels closer and farther at the same time, as if space itself has lost its strict definition. There is no return in the usual sense, no cycle completing itself, only a soft echo of earlier impressions, shapes that feel familiar without being exact, like memory without detail, like recognition without clarity. The fire flickers slowly. Each movement of flame is quiet, not expressive, just continuing. Air around it moves gently, not as wind with direction, but as presence shifting through still space. Breathing becomes more noticeable again, not as action, but as rhythm that does not require attention to exist. Inhale, exhale, but even these are no longer counted. They are simply part of the same quiet continuity as everything else. The village is no longer observed from above, no longer from within. It is simply there, without perspective, holding it in place. Forms are present but softened, edges no longer distinct enough to define boundaries clearly. Everything feels like it is slightly fading, but not into absence, into depth that cannot be followed further. The beginning is not reached again. It is suggested, like a distant reflection on still water, recognizable only when not looked at directly. The idea of start and end loses meaning here. What remains is only continuity that bends back into itself without direction. A quiet return that does not arrive anywhere. The fire remains, smaller now, more subtle, almost indistinguishable from surrounding darkness unless attention rests on it fully. And even then, it does not stand apart. It belongs to the same quiet field as everything else. Nothing closes. Nothing opens. There is only continuation that feels like memory of itself. Soft, distant, fading gently into the same stillness it began with.